Hi everyone, I'm Shelly and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. It's been a while since I've done a homeschooling video, so today I wanted to talk a little bit about notebooking because I haven't really addressed that in a little bit. So I just wanted to talk to you about styles of notebooks you can use and some pros and cons for each one. For those of you who don't know what notebooking is, in a very brief description, notebooking is a way for your kids to describe the things that they've learned without using worksheets or maybe chapter review questions, for example. They might do written narration, they might do some sort of drawing explaining what it is that they read about or that they learned. But if you would like a more detailed description, I will leave my notebooking playlist in the description box because I'm not going to get into that today. What I am going to get into though are the different styles of notebooks that you can use for notebooking. Now, typically, most people will think of a 3-ring binder when it comes to notebooking, and that is honestly my favorite choice to use for notebooking. But it's not the only one that I use, and I wanted to just go over with you some of the other options that you have. Now, if you are first starting out on notebooking, and if you don't really know for sure whether or not your kids would enjoy it, you can always just start out with just your typical spiral notebook. They're very inexpensive, they're easy to come by, and again, they are easily replaced if you find out that your kids don't really enjoy doing notebooking. So rather than jumping in and buying all sorts of binders and notebooking pages and everything, you could always have your kids just start in a typical spiral bound notebook. Now, some of the advantages I've already described. They're easy to come by and they are extremely inexpensive. Some of the disadvantages though are that your kids are, they're limited to just the lined pages, unless if you would get creative and cut out maybe some cardstock or some other sorts of papers to glue to it so that your kids could maybe do illustrations or have some sort of decorative sheet on it. Another disadvantage of these is that they do tear out easily. So you do have to be very careful with the spiral bound notebook, but again, they are, they're a good way for you to start. Now, some people opt for making their own spiral bound notebook. Now, this one I had gotten from Family Nest Printing, so all of the sheets were already in it. So you could use this for notebooking. As you can see here, so for my daughter's notebooking page here, she had written a story and then she drew something to go with it. But some of the one of the disadvantages of this is the same thing that is with the spiral notebook, is that your kids are limited to the pages that are in here. But again, you can always make up for that by just gluing other sheets in here, maybe cutting out shapes of cardstock or colored paper and gluing it in here and letting your kids write on that as well. Now, I know that there are some people who will print up a bunch of notebooking pages. They will have their kids complete notebooking pages, and then after the notebook is done, then they will take it to maybe Staples or someplace like that, and then they will have it spiral bound. So that is also an option. So these pages, they don't come out as easily as this spiral notebook. And it's easy to see why. They're definitely sturdier. And so that is definitely more of an advantage for this kind. And one of the disadvantages, if you are printing up a bunch of notebooking pages and then having it bound afterwards, is just that you need to find somewhere to store all of those sheets until you do get them bound, and so that they're not, all bent up. And I know that in my house, that's exactly what would happen. I always have good intentions, but my house is so cramped and there's so many of us that it is very hard to keep things neat if we don't have them put where they need to be, like immediately. So another option is just a composition book. And this really has a lot of the same advantages as the spiral bound notebook. They're inexpensive, they are easy to come by, and the same disadvantages. They are usually stuck with just the normal pages that come in. So the composition books are also another good way for your kids to start notebooking. So you can see here that my daughter had glued something from one of our nature studies on here. Now in this one though, I can show you that she did glue a notebooking page. So this is cloud observations. So she actually did glue that into here. So that is always something that you can do if you don't want to go all out with a 3-ring binder, because let's face it, if you don't have a lot of space to have a bunch of notebooks, the 3-ring binders especially, and if you have multiple children doing them, it is easier to store something that is this thick rather than the size of a 3-ring binder. So composition books are another choice that you can use. And finally, I always use this binder as my example, just because this is one of my favorite notebooks that my kids have done. So yeah, it looks like it's been through a war because it's extremely old, and I keep using it in a lot of my videos. But you can use a 3-ring binder also. Yeah, it's old, and this is the type that you would print up notebooking pages. And I'll leave a link to a resource for notebooking pages in the description box. And I do recommend that you get yourself a good 3-ring binder. As you can see in this 3-ring binder, it's falling apart, which is partially my fault because I use it so much. But we did get it at the Dollar Tree, so it might have held up better had I not done that. I do recommend that you use the sheet protectors if you are going to use a 3-ring binder. But I will say that out of all of the notebooking styles that you can use, the 3-ring binder is my favorite choice, just because it is so much easier for you to add sheets in after your kids have already done them. Sometimes you might decide in that you want your kids to do something that will go in a separate section of the notebook, and it's certainly easier to insert that into a 3-ring binder than it would be if all of a sudden you want to put something in the middle of, say, a composition book. That's not going to happen so easily. But yeah, one of the disadvantages is that they take up so much space. And honestly, that would really be the only disadvantage that I can think of for using a 3-ring binder, other than if you do not use sheet protectors. If you don't use sheet protectors, especially if you're using lined notebook paper as your notebooking sheets, yes, they will tear out easily. So you want to really try to protect them. Protect your kids' work so that they can look at the things that they've done in the future and say, hey, I remember that and I had such a good time. And then your kids will have those memories to go back on. That's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one either here or over on Instagram. And if you like my work and would like to check out my Patreon page, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well. And I hope you have a great day.